we bring you the unvarnished truth of law enforcement. This broadcast features unfiltered, unedited, and completely raw footage. Join us as we step onto the front lines of justice, providing a transparent view of the critical moments that shape our society.
Ma'am, step away from the Lexus. Now.
This is my car. What crime are you investigating?
Suspicious activity. Show me ID. Don't make this difficult.
Suspicious isn't a reason. Am I being detained or am I free to go?
8:17 p.m. The parking lot was still busy, carts rattling over concrete engines, idling a warm wind carrying the mixed smell of asphalt and fast food from across the street. Ma'am, step away from the vehicle. The voice came sharp, rehearsed, carrying authority without explanation. The woman froze for half a second, one hand still holding a shopping bag, the other resting on the open trunk of a silver Lexus. She turned slowly. A police officer stood a few feet behind her, hand resting near his belt, eyes fixed on her like she had already done something wrong. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked calmly. "Yes. This vehicle matches a report. I need you to step away and show some identification." She looked down at the trunk, then back at him. The car was running. The key fob was in her palm. Groceries sat neatly arranged inside. Nothing was hidden. Nothing was rushed. A report of what exactly? The officer shifted his stance. Suspicious activity. Suspicious how? Her voice stayed even, but the air around them changed. A couple loading boxes nearby slowed down. Someone pushing a cart stopped walking. The officer's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, don't make this difficult. Step away from the vehicle now." She exhaled through her nose, controlled, deliberate. "Officer, this is my car. I'm loading my own purchases. I've done nothing illegal." She raised the key fob slightly and pressed the button. The headlights flashed. The doors locked, then unlocked. The sound echoed louder than it should have in the open lot. The officer did not relax. Instead, his voice hardened. "I still need your ID." "On what legal basis?" she asked. That question landed wrong. His shoulders squared. Most people didn't ask questions. They complied. They apologized. They tried to explain themselves nervously. "I'm conducting an investigation," he said. "Into what crime?" A phone appeared a few yards away, lifted chest high. Another person slowed their car window half down. The woman by the Lexus noticed all of it without turning her head. "Officer, am I being detained or am I free to go?" The officer glanced around, then back at her. His pride had witnesses now. "You're being detained until I sort this out." She nodded once, a small motion more acknowledgement than agreement. "Very well. I will comply. But I want it clearly stated that I do not consent to any searches, and I dispute the legal basis of this stop." His eyes narrowed. That kind of language didn't come from nowhere. She reached slowly into her purse, narrating every movement, and pulled out her wallet. Inside were several cards, stacked neatly, edges worn from years of use. She handed him her driver's license first. He read the name, looked at her face again, looked back down. "This your car?" "Yes." "Prove it." Without a word, she pressed the key fob again. The car responded obediently. For a brief moment, this should have ended, but instead of backing down, the officer took a step closer. "Ma'am, you're being uncooperative." She met his eyes for the first time. Firm, unblinking. "Asserting my rights is not a crime." The parking lot had gone quiet enough that nearby conversations faded. Phones stayed raised, and that was the moment a routine stop crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. 10 years earlier, long before the parking lot and the flashing headlights, the woman standing beside the Lexus had learned what it meant to be questioned without cause. She grew up on the south side of a Midwestern city where police sirens were part of the nightly soundtrack. Her mother worked double shifts as a nurse. Her father drove a city bus until his back gave out. Dinner conversations were about bills, court dates for neighbors, and which streets to avoid after dark. No one in her family had been to law school. No one had worked for the federal government. But from a young age, she listened closely when adults talked about power, who had it and who didn't. In college, she majored in political science and waited tables at night. She studied Supreme Court cases between orders, memorizing dissents while balancing trays. Professors noticed her discipline. A scholarship followed. Then another. Law school came next, brutal and isolating. She was one of 3 black students in her class, the only woman of color in her section. Cold calls were relentless. Mistakes were remembered longer when she made them. She graduated near the top of her class anyway. Clerkships followed. Long hours. Federal courthouses with marble floors and security checkpoints that never forgot her face. She learned early that excellence was not enough. She had to be precise, controlled, unimpeachable. As a federal prosecutor, she handled cases involving financial fraud, civil rights violations, and public corruption. She put away men who wore suits and men who wore badges. She argued before judges who tested her harder than her white colleagues. She never raised her voice. She never missed a citation. At 43, she was appointed Assistant United States Attorney. By 48, she was leading a unit. She trained younger lawyers. She lectured on constitutional limits of law enforcement authority. She believed in accountability not as a slogan, but as a system. And yet, none of that followed her into the parking lot. The officer facing her had his own story, one that explained his certainty just as clearly. He joined the department at 24, straight out of the academy. Second-generation law enforcement. His father had worn the same uniform. In training, he learned to control scenes, establish dominance, and trust his instincts. Supervisors praised him for being proactive, aggressive. He made a lot of stops, wrote a lot of reports. Over the years, complaints accumulated quietly. Disrespect, unnecessary escalation, stops that went nowhere. None of them stuck. Body camera footage was inconclusive. Supervisors cited stress, miscommunication, lack of evidence. He completed remedial training, signed acknowledgments, returned to patrol. He worked a district that included upscale shopping centers and luxury cars. He was told to be vigilant. Vehicle thefts happened there, they said. Suspicious persons reports came in frequently, vague descriptions, uneasy callers, people who felt something was off but couldn't explain why. He learned patterns, or thought he did, so when the call came in about a woman lingering near a high-end vehicle, his mind filled in the rest. He arrived already convinced there was something to uncover. And when she spoke calmly, when she questioned him, when she did not perform fear the way he expected, it felt like a challenge. To him, compliance looked a certain way. Apologies, nervous laughter, deference. She offered none of it. Back in the present, the space between them in the parking lot felt heavier by the second. The officer glanced again at her license. Clean record. Local address. The car registered in her name. Facts stacked up in her favor. But backing down now meant admitting error. In front of witnesses. On camera. He handed the license back slowly. "Stay right there," he said. "I'm going to run your information." "Am I suspected of a crime?" she asked. He didn't answer. She watched him walk back to his cruiser, shoulders stiff. She noticed his hesitation before opening the door. The way he looked once more at the phones recording him. She memorized the time. The angle of the sun. The badge number on his chest. This was not her first unjustified stop, but it was the first time she stood in one as someone who knew exactly how it would end. The officer sat in his car longer than necessary. When he returned, his tone had changed, sharper, defensive. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the vehicle and place your hands where I can see them." "Why?" she asked. "Because you're interfering with my investigation." "Interfering how?" The words hung in the air, unanswered. The crowd murmured. Someone whispered, "This is crazy." Another voice said, "Keep recording." And in that moment, two pasts collided. A career built on restraint and law, another built on unchecked authority, both now locked into a path neither of them could reverse. The officer's door closed with a dull thud. His engine idled. Seconds stretched longer than they should have. The woman remained still beside the Lexus, hands, visible posture straight. She felt the weight of eyes on her back. A man leaned against his car, pretending to check messages while filming. A young couple whispered near a cart return. Someone else stood openly now, phone raised without apology. She broke the silence first. "Officer, I am asking again. What crime am I suspected of committing?" No response. She could see him through the windshield, head tilted down toward the dashboard, computer fingers tapping harder than necessary. The screen reflected faintly in his sunglasses. When he finally stepped out, his movements were more rigid, less controlled. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle." "I am already away from it," she said, gesturing to the clear space between her and the trunk. He ignored that. "I need you to place your hands on the hood." "Why?" "Because you're escalating the situation." A murmur rippled through the small crowd. Someone said, "She's not doing anything." Another voice answered, "He just doesn't like that she's talking back." She turned her head slightly, addressing the bystanders without looking at them directly. "Please keep recording. This matters." The officer stiffened. "Don't talk to them." "I have the right to speak," she replied calmly. He stepped closer. His presence was meant to overwhelm, to shrink her. Instead, she reached into her purse again, slow and deliberate. "Officer, before this goes any further, you should know who you're detaining." He scoffed lightly. I don't care who you are. She removed a second card and held it up at chest height. United States Department of Justice. Assistant United States Attorney. The words landed but did not register. He barely glanced at it. Anyone can fake a badge, he said. Call it in, she replied. Verify it. The number is public. A woman in the crowd spoke up. He should check that. The officer snapped back. This does not concern you. It concerns all of us, another voice said. For a brief moment, doubt flickered across his face. Then it vanished, replaced by resolve. The wrong kind. Ma'am, turn around. She inhaled once. Are you arresting me? You're being detained for obstruction. Obstruction requires an underlying lawful investigation, she said evenly. You have articulated none. That was the sentence that broke him. His hand moved to the cuffs. The sound of metal clicking free was sharp, unmistakable. Phones lifted higher, someone cursed under their breath. She turned slowly, exactly as instructed, hands moving behind her back without resistance. The cuffs closed. Cold. Tight. Too tight. As he led her toward the cruiser, she spoke clearly. Voice steady enough for every camera. My name is on record. My credentials were offered. I am complying under protest. This arrest is unlawful. He said nothing. The parking lot no longer felt ordinary. It felt like a courtroom without a judge, evidence piling up in real time, watched by strangers who knew they were witnessing something that would not end here. And as the cruiser door opened, the officer finally understood that the crowd was no longer watching her. They were watching him. The back seat of the patrol car was molded plastic, curved and unforgiving. It smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale air, a place designed for bodies, not dignity. When the door closed, the sound landed heavier than the cuffs had. Final. She adjusted her shoulders as much as the restraints allowed. The cuffs bit into her wrists with every small movement. Not enough to scream, enough to remind. The officer sat in the front seat without turning around. The engine stayed off. 10 seconds passed, then 20. Through the tinted window, she could still see phones raised outside. The parking lot had become a ring of witnesses, their faces blurred but intent. She spoke first, not loudly but clearly. For the record, I am not resisting. No reply. The car finally started. As it rolled forward, the crowd drifted out of frame one by one, replaced by storefronts and traffic lights. Normal life continuing, while something abnormal unfolded inside a moving vehicle. She focused on details. The time on the dashboard clock. The route he took out of the shopping center. Left turn. Red light. She memorized everything. Habit. Training. Her thoughts stayed organized, almost clinical. Fourth Amendment violation. Unlawful detention. Escalation without reasonable suspicion. Arrest without probable cause. Failure to verify credentials. Retaliation for speech. Each item clicked into place like a checklist she had reviewed countless times in other cases. Only now she was the subject. In the front seat, the officer's confidence was draining by the mile. He adjusted the rearview mirror twice, cleared his throat. His radio crackled once, then again. He did not key the mic. Halfway to the station, doubt finally surfaced. You really work for the government? He asked, eyes still forward. Yes, she said. Where? Department of Justice. Another silence. Longer this time. He exhaled through his nose, slow and audible. When they pulled into the station lot, the building looked exactly like it always had. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, a place where mistakes were supposed to be corrected quietly. Inside, the cuffs came off only after paperwork began. A desk officer took her belongings one by one. Phone, wallet, keys. When the wallet opened, the credentials slid into view, official seal catching the light. The room changed. The desk officer paused, then looked up at her, then back down again. He picked up the card with care as if it might burn. One moment, ma'am. A supervisor appeared within minutes, then another. Conversations happened just out of earshot. Glances were exchanged. Someone finally asked the question that should have been asked in the parking lot. Why was she brought in? No one answered cleanly. She sat straight in the chair, wrists marked, red eyes steady. She did not argue. She did not explain. She waited. Because by then the injustice had already done its work, and every second from here forward would only make it louder. The supervisor returned with another man, older, heavier in posture, the kind of authority that didn't need to announce itself. He held the credentials in his hand, turning them once, then again, eyes narrowing as he read the name. He looked at her, then at the arresting officer, then back at the card. Where did you pick her up? The officer answered too quickly. Shopping center parking lot. Suspicious activity call. Suspicious how? A pause. She was near a vehicle. The supervisor didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Near her own vehicle, the room went quiet. The desk officer stopped typing. Someone in the hallway slowed their walk. "Sir," the supervisor said, still calm. "This identification belongs to a United States attorney." The words settled slowly like dust after something heavy had fallen. The arresting officer's face drained of color. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. "That's not possible," he said. "It is possible," the supervisor replied. "And it is verified." He turned back to her. "Ma'am, can you confirm your office and position for the record?" She did. Clear, precise, no extra words. The supervisor nodded once. He didn't look angry. He looked concerned in the way people do when they realize the consequences are already irreversible. He stepped aside and made a call. Short, quiet. When he hung up, his tone had changed. Less command, more caution. "You are being released immediately," he said. "On what basis was I detained?" she asked. Another pause. "We are reviewing that. I want everything documented," she said. The call for service. The body camera footage. The incident report. Names and badge numbers of everyone involved. The supervisor nodded again. "You'll have it." The arresting officer stood, frozen eyes fixed on the floor. The authority he had carried into the parking lot was gone, replaced by something smaller. Fear. Her cuffs were removed. Her belongings returned. She stood, wrists still marked, suit, slightly wrinkled, composure intact. As she walked towards the exit, the supervisor followed a step behind. "On behalf of the department, I apologize." She stopped once turned halfway. "This should never have happened," she said. "Not to anyone." Outside, the night air felt cooler than before. Her phone buzzed immediately. Missed calls, messages. The story had already started moving without her. She took one breath, steady and deliberate. What had begun as a baseless stop was now something else entirely. Not just a mistake, a reckoning. By morning, the video was everywhere. Multiple angles stitched together by strangers who had never met her, timestamps lining up, voices overlapping. Her calm questions. His commands. The cuffs. The silence afterward. By noon, it had millions of views. By evening, it had a narrative. And by the second day, it had consequences. She filed the lawsuit quietly. No press conference. No statement beyond the complaint itself. 47 pages. Single-spaced. Each allegation tied to a specific second of footage. Each violation anchored in case law the officer himself was sworn to uphold. Unlawful detention. False arrest. Retaliation for protected speech. Failure to articulate reasonable suspicion. Failure to verify credentials. Violation of clearly established constitutional rights. The city attorney's office watched the video once, then again, then a third time with sound off, as if silence might change what was already obvious. It didn't. Internal Affairs opened an investigation, but it moved faster than usual. Too fast to pretend this was routine. The officer was placed on administrative leave. His body camera history reviewed. His prior complaints resurfaced not as isolated incidents, but as a pattern that no one had wanted to name. Public response was immediate and unforgiving. Comment sections filled with stories that sounded eerily similar. Different parking lots, different cities, same outcome. The difference this time was the title next to her name, United States Attorney. City council members demanded answers. Advocacy groups demanded reform. National outlets requested interviews. She declined all of them. She didn't need to speak. The footage spoke clearly enough. 2 weeks later, the department released its findings. Policy violations, improper escalation, failure to de-escalate. The language was careful, but the meaning was not. The officer was terminated. The settlement followed months later. Quietly announced. A number large enough to make headlines, but small enough to remind everyone that money was never the point. The agreement included mandatory training revisions, updated stop protocols, and an early warning system for officers with repeated complaints. Accountability on paper. On the day the settlement became public, she returned to work as usual. Same office, same desk, same responsibility to enforce the law impartially, even against those who wore the same uniform as the man who had arrested her. Colleagues asked how she felt. She answered honestly. Satisfied, she said, not surprised. Because justice, when it finally arrives, is rarely dramatic. It is procedural, documented, earned line by line. And for the officer who once stood in a parking lot, certain of his authority, the reckoning was complete. Career ended. Name attached forever to a video that would outlive any explanation he could offer. The system had corrected itself not because it was designed to, but because it was forced to. And that distinction mattered. The law is clear even when situations are not. Under the Fourth Amendment, police officers may briefly detain a person only when they can articulate specific and objective facts that create reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. Not a feeling, not a hunch, not a vague report that collapses under basic questioning. Standing next to a car, loading groceries, holding keys. None of those meet the legal threshold. They never have. What happened in that parking lot was not a gray area. It was a textbook violation. The moment the officer continued the detention after ownership of the vehicle was demonstrated, the stop became unlawful. The moment he escalated because his authority was questioned, it became retaliatory. The moment he placed handcuffs on someone without probable cause, it became false arrest. Credentials did not create her rights. They merely exposed the violation more clearly. This is how bias operates in real time. Quietly, procedurally, disguised as caution. A person does not look like what the officer expects, so the rules bend. Questions become defiance. Calm becomes threat. Compliance is redefined to mean submission. And that pattern does not only harm the people stopped, it corrodes the system itself. For anyone watching this unfold and wondering what they should do if they ever find themselves in a similar situation, the guidance is simple but critical. Stay calm. Do not resist. Ask clearly if you are being detained or if you are free to go. If detained, ask what crime is suspected. Do not consent to searches. Keep your hands visible. If others are present, ask them to record. Documentation is not confrontation, it is protection. And understand this: asserting your rights is not obstruction. Silence is not consent. Respect is not submission. The deeper lesson here is not about one officer or one lawsuit. It is about how quickly assumptions can override law when power goes unchecked. If this can happen to a federal prosecutor who knows the law and has the resources to fight back, it can happen to anyone. Justice worked this time, not because the system is flawless, but because evidence forced it to. Cameras, witnesses, paper trails, accountability only arrived after exposure. So the real question is not whether this story ended well. It is how many similar stories never reach this ending. That answer depends on awareness, on recording, on insisting that rights apply to everyone in every parking lot on every ordinary day, because the law only protects those it is enforced for, and enforcement begins with knowing it.
Seeking the truth is our ultimate mission. We dig deep to hold power to account, relying entirely on facts and data. Remember, the records never lie. Thank you for tuning in and supporting our work.